Hi, everybody. Welcome back to a very special episode of the Always Connected podcast. Lately, I've been doing most of those live and solo, bringing on you, members of the audience, to ask questions about a specific topic. But this is a little bit different. Every once in a while, I can't be there live, so I find just the right guest to pre-record and share with you. And I found her. I'm going to bring Ellen McCord on now, and we're going to show you, you'll know exactly why I brought her on. Her story is so interesting. It has to do with mediumship. It also has to do with what are called spiritual emergencies, when you just open up to this greater reality and may not know what's going on. But what happened to Ellen as a result of her spiritual emergency is really going to intrigue you and inform you and maybe cause you to look at the world a little differently. So, Ellen McCord, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we first met when I brought Wolf's Message to the Seattle area on our round the country tour, the documentary Wolf's Message. And I remember you came up to me afterwards and you gave me a little gift that you had made. And I actually ended up talking about that in a workshop that I did later called The Forgotten Center. But that was where we first met.
Yes. Yes, it was. And I loved that event. It was a really heart-filling event. I had seen Wolf's Message before, but I wanted to see it in person, and I wanted to bring you that thank you gift
Yeah.
because you got my mediumship launched.
I got your mediumship launched. And so I
Yep.
find this very interesting as well. And we're going to talk about training for mediums, how important it is, and what is a born medium versus somebody who can learn mediumship. And so we reconnected again recently when you reached out to me by email. You want to talk about that?
Yes, I had I had been encouraged and had resisted, but did it anyway. A podcast with a friend of mine who works with people who are having withdrawals, very heavy withdrawals from psychiatric drugs and are suffering. And she and we've known each other since 2010. And so she and I did a podcast. And since I mentioned you and I mentioned mediumship and we talked about the spiritual connection thing, I had your thank you note. And so I thought, out of courtesy, I would send you a link to the podcast that she did, who knew that it would turn into this, right?
Yeah, well, I think Spirit knew it because as I watched that podcast, I was so intrigued and really buoyed by the mission that your friend is on. What is her name again?
Her name is Angie Peacock. She's in the movie Medicating Normal. She's actually a veteran who has taken this on, and she's quite good at what she does. She's
It's about people who are on psychiatric drugs and may not need to be and helping them get off it. Is that correct?
What she does is she really helps comfort people who are in the throes of withdrawal. What people don't know and don't talk about, and most doctors don't know, is the significant withdrawal effects they're quite significant. And they sometimes people get off those drugs too soon and they don't know how to do it, and they go through really awful things, and some of them don't make it because the pain is so great. Angie is she has her MSW, but she is actually a coach, and she keeps everybody going with, you can do this, you can do this. And she and I have been off of psychiatric drugs about the same period of time, about 10 and a half years.
Yeah, I just was fascinated. And also my heart just opened to you and all the people you were talking about and the kind of pain you've gone through. So we'll touch on that today. Very emotional topic. I'd like to go to your spiritual emergency, have you talk about that, but I want to know, have you been seeing spirits your whole life?
I have.
Okay.
I have. And I'll just share one story because I grew up in a household where not only seeing spirits was okay, talking about it was okay. I had an experience when I was 15 years old, and it was a spirit that came to me at night, and it was heavy breathing, and I thought it was my mom maybe tucking me in, and I turned over, and I felt this weight on my shoulder, and then I turned back over again, and I saw this robed figure, and it was standing. And usually I slept with my door closed. So it was standing in front, and then it went into the doorway and just sort of disappeared slowly into the doorway and left. When I turned over, I said, "Mom," and it wasn't clear. Wasn't my mom. So the next morning, I got up and I said, "Mom, I had this most unusual experience last night," and I described it to her, and she goes, "Oh, that was an incubus." And then she went over to the Encyclopedia Britannica and pulled it out. She says it's an apparition. It visits young girls. I had one too when I was 15, only mine was a man in a pinstripe suit. And she was so matter of fact about it. And it was
Yeah.
like no big deal. And what's interesting, it wasn't until years and years and years later that I realized that there was sort of a negative, nefarious association with incubi. And and my for my mom, it was like, oh, my little daughter had the same experience I did, which
I've been a medium since 2009, and I've never heard that term.
oh, look it up. It
Yeah.
you know it has there's a negative evil association with it. And what's interesting is my mother did not put that association on it when she read that out of she either edited what the encyclopedia said or just didn't want that to be my experience.
What a gift that is, because I have talked to so many people who have seen spirits since they were children, and their parents said, "Oh, no, don't mess with that." And so they send them away and they never come back until they realize that mediumship, talking to spirits, is not necessarily a negative or bad thing, and they have to turn it back on.
Right, right.
Huh. How old were you at that time?
15, a little over
15,
15.
just
Yeah.
like your mom.
Yeah,
So
just like
was that a standalone experience, or did it happen more often after that?
oh, it happened frequently. I mean, when I was small, I would see spirits in my room and they would scare me. There were some family circumstances in which that I don't really want to go into, but I was this was when I was sleeping alone and I would feel the spirits and see the spirits in the room. And I would go in and crawl in the bed with my brother because it would scare me a little bit.
I guess.
Yeah. So yeah.
But did you ever interact with any of them or identify any of them?
Only years later, when I was taught a certain practice that I don't do anymore, did I recognize that I was interacting with children I had played with when I was experiencing abuse.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I would step out of this reality and I would be in another realm. And it was years later when I had a mentor who taught me something that I have a different belief system about now, and it kind of got me into trouble a little bit. Made me sick to be doing it because spirit was saying stop it. But I'm going to set that aside and say uh, uh, what I learned was that when I was experiencing abuse, I actually was stepping into other realms, which is why I think that veil for me is so thin. I call myself a liminal person. I live in that threshold.
The in-between world, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So that's cycle. I know very little about psychology. I'm not trained in any of that, but that would be called dissociation, right?
It, I've had so many different labels over the years. Yes, it would be called dissociation. It would be called that. Yeah. But I've
And
had,
I don't put any feeling of good or bad on that.
no,
That's a
no,
known thing that can happen when you're going through trauma.
that's
But you're
exactly right.
saying that you, during those times, were interacting with benevolent beings that comforted you. Is that right?
Children, and they were children.
Huh. And
They
you were
were,
a child at the time.
I was a child at the time.
Huh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, do you mind talking about your spiritual emergency?
No, I don't. I actually I've had several, Suzanne. This is not the one that I spoke about with Angie uh, was just one. And may I read a quote that I wrote the story of that particular one that happened in 2001 and it was published.
Mm.
And I found this beautiful quote that I'm just going to have to put on my glasses to read it. But it was from a brother in a monk. Here's the quote. The poor psychologists, they're doing a good job. They really are. There are times when psychotherapy is a tremendous help because when you're on the verge of going insane, raving mad, you're about to become either a psychotic or a mystic.
Huh.
That's what the mystic is, the opposite of the lunatic. Do you know one sign that you've woken up? It's when you're asking yourself, am I crazy or are all of them crazy?
Wow.
And
Yeah,
that's
this
Anthony DeMello.
this Anthony DeMello. Okay, this just takes me to one of the three main messages of the documentary Wolf's Message, who we have a young man who was labeled schizophrenic. And what he told me, without knowing that about him, what he told me from across the veil was, I was in two worlds at once. It was very busy in here. And he pointed at his head when he said that. And his dad said, yeah, he always used to say that. So that really got me thinking, who's to say what is insanity? And in your podcast with Angie, you talked about shamans in indigenous cultures are the ones who see beings in the greater reality, and the community nurtures them through that. We many times give psychiatric drugs.
Right. And I wouldn't even say, I don't use that terminology. Angie uses that terminology. I would say the elders and the people who have walked those realms because it's not necessarily in an indigenous culture, it's not necessarily a shaman, which I put in air quotes because that's a term I don't typically use. But you're right. What is and they do this. This is one of the practices that is in the spiritist hospitals in Brazil, and they actually have mediums who work with the psychiatrists and help figure out what the kind of world is being traversed by this person who's going through this experience.
And spiritists in Brazil being those who can very clearly see those in the spirit world, communicate with them with evidence, but are not considered crazy.
Right. And what's most important is the spiritist tradition is it's not spiritualist, it's spiritist, and
Yeah.
it's a very indigenously based system that they've retained in Brazil. And so they have spiritist hospitals where they do all kinds of healing and psychic surgery. Oh, they do all kinds of things in Brazil with spiritists.
So as you tell us about whichever of your emergencies is relevant here, I'm curious what would have happened if you had been living in Brazil at the time.
I'll start with the first one then, Suzanne, because the
Okay.
first one was the most interesting. In 1974, I had been going to the University of Arizona in Tucson, where you are, and sometimes not today, but
Yeah.
um, I'd been going to the University of Arizona, and at the end of that semester, I had uh, a significant spiritual emergency. I had a big download. And what I got, and I went into this altered state. And
Just out of the blue.
no, well, no, not out of the blue. I had been using marijuana
Okay.
while I was going to school. I had taken speed during the uh, um, finals,
Okay.
and then I had driven all the way from Tucson up to Northern California, where my parents were. So there were a lot of different stressors.
Okay.
And I had been studying things that had blown my programming open. My programming was completely blown open. I was in honors in both English and philosophy. So I was reading a lot of things that were just challenging every belief that I had. So it was like boom. So when I got back to Tucson, my aunt and uncle took me to the University Medical Center because what happens for me when this happens, and I think this happens to a lot of people, is there's an enormous amount of energy coming in to the body. So there's a lot of agitation and a
Yeah.
lot of things that are then described in a DSM as a certain kind of mental illness, right?
Well, my guides have said from the beginning the human nervous system can only handle so much energy. And people want these bells and whistles experiences, but they say it will blow your circuits. So be happy with what is given to you as you can handle it. So it
Amen
sounds
to
like
that.
you opened up through the use of perhaps drugs and changing your belief system, you opened up to a lot of energy.
A
Okay.
lot of energy. And it already was natural for me to be in those realms. So, I
Hmm.
mean, it's already a natural place. So what my aunt and uncle took me to the University Medical Center, and I stood in front of a admitting nurse and I said to her, I said, humanity is about to take another step. We're evolving. We're going to become aware that we're all one. And then I said the main um, capacity that's coming online is telepathy, and there will be a time when we won't be able to lie to each other because we'll be able to see through it. And I said all this to this admitting nurse, and I watched her write down bizarre rambling and a very unfortunate diagnosis. And I went, uh-oh. I went,
Oh, wow.
I'm, yeah,
And I have goosebumps right now because now everybody listening to this 74, how many, 50 years later,
yeah,
we know this is truth. I mean, we're not at the point yet where we can all do telepathy, but that's the way it is across the veil without the bodies.
yeah.
Nothing's hidden. Consciousness rising. Wow.
And that's what I said to the admitting nurse. And I realized when I watched her write down that diagnosis that I was in trouble and I better sign myself in. So I signed myself in and I refused the medications for 3 days. And on the third day, they locked me in a 6 by 6 white room with fluorescent lights and nothing but a mattress on the floor
Oh
and
my.
and a little window that had wire in it. And they told me to go to sleep. And
Isn't this everybody's nightmare?
it
Yeah.
is,
And you
it
were
is.
living it. Oh my.
And I was living it. Yeah, that's what happened. And I screamed because I'm in this room and I'm overstimulated and these lights are flickering and it's
Worst possible
tiny.
thing for a sensitive person is fluorescent lights.
Not only
Not the
sensitive, but
worst.
completely in a spiritual, like blown open, like completely blown open.
Oof.
And and so there's lights flickering, and I screamed and I said, "Will you please turn off the lights?" And I only could see this. And they say, "We have to observe you."
Oh,
And then they'd walk away. And finally, I said, I don't know how many hours I was in there, but I finally said, what do I need to do to get you to turn off these lights? And they came in, it was almost ritualistic. They came in with this orange liquid, which I found out later was chloropromazine, which is thorazine.
mm,
And that's how I was treated at that time. So from then on, anything that I was experiencing in that other realm, I tried to sink like a cork. It was like, I don't want this. So it's taken me many, many years to resolve that.
wow. So I'm just checking in here. Where do we go with this? I mean, does it serve a purpose to talk more about the experiences? I'll bet they were mostly similar, being wide open, right? Each
Yeah,
time you're getting access to more information than most people do. And
yeah,
I remember I've talked about this in my presentation, Heart Gifts. That's on YouTube. That somebody once asked Edgar Casey, who founded the Association for Research and Enlightenment, Mr. Casey, am I mentally ill? And he replied, Madam, everyone is slightly mentally ill to someone else.
good
I,
point.
I thought that was so interesting. But then when Wolf came to me, here I am. Centuries ago, if I had said I'm bringing through this spirit named Wolf and he's sharing this information, I would have been burned at the stake for being a witch, right?
Right.
But now I feel safe in saying that I talk to those who have passed. But there's this bell curve, And if you all believe certain things and have these certain human in a body experiences, you're considered normal. But if you open up to experiences that other people don't, and it frightens them, especially, then maybe you're medicated. But here's a question, though. What is the point at which psychiatric drugs are helpful?
I can't answer that question, and I wouldn't want to even try. I think this is such a personal thing, but I do want to recommend one thing.
Right.
Anyone who is considering it needs to have informed consent. And there's a wonderful website. It's called it's innercompassinitiative.org. And it's very well done. And it speaks to different how the DSM manual is the diagnostic and statistical manual under which people are diagnosed, how that's derived. It talks about all the different classes of drugs. It talks about the things that we don't know. It's just an area, not only do I not want to tread in, but I want to say to anyone who is taking one of those drugs, do not or a whole bunch of them, do not stop without really finding out something. And I want to even say, bless those doctors who are trying to do deep prescribing, but they also don't really know what it is that is the best for the individual. So that's just something I cannot answer, Suzanne. And I have no, I want to say judgment or anything about anyone who chooses to take
Yeah.
those because
So let me reword the question.
yeah,
Is there a time when psychiatric drugs are helpful, in your civilian opinion?
not for me. And
Not
that's
for you. Well, that's a
I'm
good
the
answer.
only person that I can speak to about that.
Okay.
I would not ever want to impose that on anyone else ever.
Huh. So you had several of these periods in your life. I've been calling them spiritual emergency, but how would you define a spiritual emergency? I know how I would say it, but you're the guest, so.
Well, for me, it is a time when all of a sudden there's something that some sets of programming or some sets of perception. I'm going to call it perception.
Yeah.
Because for me, it was always a shift in perception, and I could see it was like colors changed. You know how people who have near-death experiences talk about how beautiful the colors
Oh
become?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So it's like the colors change. And then for me, I can only describe my own because I haven't been in anybody else's. Um, the colors change. And then all of a sudden, I start hearing the symbology of words and some of the deeper things that are behind those words, like the energies that are being evoked by the use of, and I know you're very sensitive to this, you speak about this, um, the energies that are being evoked. And I also start seeing, I start perceiving the flows of energy, for example, in a room, how things are flowing, what's coming out of people. These are things I can see in my regular walking around life, as being I call myself a liminal person, being someone who stands in that threshold.
Yeah.
But at that point, for me, a spiritual emergency is when I step so fully into it, I can't shut it off.
Ooh. Do you sense it coming on? And then is there a thought of, oh no, here we go again?
There has been,
Mhm.
although I just have to say that since I have embraced my mediumship and have done my work on my own, the fears, because that fear of being locked in that room and have that fear made me want to push all that stuff down. Now I'm using it to help people.
That's just
So
see everybody. Did I tell you this is fascinating to me? And it's a scary topic, like, because nobody wants to be that person locked away. And yet mediumship requires you to do cross that threshold a bit. So there are boundaries. There's so far we can go. Are you able now to maintain the amount of energy you're processing to the point where you know that it won't frighten other people.
Yes. And how I do that is very deliberate. I very deliberately meditate every morning. And you know how people talk about building energy protection?
Yeah.
I build an energy container. For me, it's containing this for me it's like I'm transmitting. I'm a little transmitter. I'm transmitting things, right? And so I'm transmitting and then I'm receiving and I'm transmitting. So if I keep my containment field such that I'm only transmitting what it is I'm choosing to live in
Yeah.
very deliberately.
I had goosebumps because this is it. We have these, we can make these choices and you learn to do it, but keep going.
Yeah. Well, as long as I do that, I'm fine. And um, I love mediumship and I love working with people who are exploring mediumship because it is, it's that doorway to finding out who, for me, it's that doorway to finding out who I am really. Who am I really? You know?
That's it. That's what I tell people. Mediumship is one of the best pathways to self-realization. There are many, but yeah, you found that out.
Yeah.
So that's what I was impressed about. That's why I wanted to bring you on the show specifically after I watched that podcast with you and Angie, and we'll put the link in the show notes here on YouTube. But you trained yourself to limit it, like you said, and to calm yourself down when it got to be too much. Just talk some more about that, because there are a lot of people can use those tools.
Well, I think the most important thing, and I mentioned this in the podcast with Angie, and I think it is something that as those, like those poor psychologists in this quote, a lot of people go through therapy and train themselves to help people, but the person who helps us the most is ourselves. And I think there's a way of using the capacity that I know I have and I trust everybody else has to sit with discomfort when something is not happening that's, an acute situation. Like if I'm not actively suffering because I'm bleeding and needing to go to the emergency department. Um, if I'm actually just having, and I don't want to minimize those emotional, psychological states or psychic states because they are really intense. But if I'm having one of those, what I found for myself is I needed to evoke a part of myself that was much calmer, that's divine, that's connected to the all that is, and that is nothing but love, and knows I'm eternal, knows I'm not gonna, this isn't gonna kill this horrible feeling you're having at this moment, Ellen, is not gonna kill you. It's just not.
Might scare you to death figuratively, but not kill you. Yeah.
Well, or even the fear part, because the fear part for me, there's a somatic piece of this. And I also talked about this in Angie's podcast. There's a somatic part where it's like if I can open to whatever it is, rather than collapse and constrict around it, then I can find the energy that is going to hold me. It's like the bigger container. It's Mother Earth. It's a warm bath. It's a bubble bath. It's whatever it is that's going to contain me. I can find that if don't constrict and around it with fear.
So you brought up the point that really struck me of how you helped yourself by becoming the observer, by widening the lens and realizing I can step back from this, what I've been calling lately an overlay, this story, the overlay over that beautiful base state that we all share, that source. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So talk some more about the observer and how it has helped you.
The observer has helped me by, I evoke, and this is where my sort of creative little quirks come in. Um, I evoke a sense of presence that has a combination of gentility and humor and a greater wisdom about why I'm having this experience in the first place. So I don't have to ask myself, oh, why am I experiencing this? I can say there is a part of me that knows
Mhm.
already why I'm
Yeah.
doing this, why I'm feeling this way, why this is going on. I don't even have to inquire about that. I just want that part of me to comfort me right now. And that's the observer. And if I can sit with that and not fight the feeling that I'm having, not try to make it go away, cry if I need to, whatever, knowing that that observer part is holding this whole experience for my highest and best good, and I know that, then what's fascinating to me is my body relaxes and it shifts.
What shifts?
That sense that I'm that sense of dread and overwhelm that oh my God, I'm not going to make it out of this. I'm not, it's that, oh, that when that feeling, those feelings that emerge, that in that moment, I would say, and I went through the worst of it when I was in withdrawal from the psych drugs.
Mm.
The worst of it was during that time. And I would feel like I would never feel any better. There would be nothing. It was like, this is going to be my permanent state. This state of whether it was shame or it was fear. A lot of it was shame. Um, that I'm going to permanently feel like this and the self-loathing that's underneath all of that. And then if I could find that larger container, that observer self, I could let my body sort of sink into it. And
Yeah.
it didn't mean that I didn't feel what I was feeling. It just meant that I was holding it in a larger context that says, I'm not only am I going to make it through it, but there's some reason I'm having this so that I can have some greater wisdom down the road.
No kidding. Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there ever any clue as to what precipitated these specific, almost overwhelming episodes, or did they just come out of the blue?
And there were several different circumstances. The one that I spoke about already was had to do with the combination of drugs and my expanding consciousness. Another one I don't want to speak about too deeply, but I do want to say I was associated with somebody who was involved in the Guyana tragedy,
Okay.
and
Wow.
that
So that's
precipitated
pretty, a lot of energy there and powerful. Yeah.
is a very powerful, and I ended up in a hospital then.
Huh.
And I was receiving information that, and it was like,
Yeah. Wow.
and so that was a period of time that I had to really do some work. But again, there was only for me at that time, I was working with a lovely psychiatrist, and it was a period of time when you'd spend an hour a week with your psychiatrist, not 15 minutes every 3 months.
Uh-huh.
And for,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so she was trying to figure out why these things would happen to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she would just give me a drug for a short period of time. I'd pop out of it and I'd be back to work.
Well, I was curious about your career or any jobs that you had. Were they at all related to anything that was going on in your life or a passion of
Well,
yours?
I was in public administration and I worked my way up from a clerk typist into an analyst. I was doing, for a period of time, I was working with University of California, Davis in their extension as a trainer and facilitator and developing curriculum. And worked into an organizational development consultant business, and
Wow.
I worked in a California county to working with the staff to redesign how they delivered services in three different departments, and we put them together. And then
Okay. So
and
some
then I became the
important.
director of that department.
Oh,
And so, yeah, I had quite a good career. I had a really good career. I did.
and so during all of that, you have this other side of you that off and on is struggling. And then are you still seeing spirits in a more I don't want to say controlled, but a more bearable way?
During that period of time, I was, and throughout my life, it's not like I'm seeing spirits, but it's like I'm experiencing them in
Okay.
the realm of relationships. So in my career, and it's more, and I'm going to say it's not so much spirits as it's energy, it's energy. So the that capacity, my liminality, I'll call it, was really good for my career because I could read circumstances. I could go in with the woman who owned the consulting firm that I worked for, and we do these consulting things with the management staff, and I could read what's going on, and then I'd write a proposal, and boom, we'd have a contract. So there was a way in which that energy sensitivity really served me well in my career.
Okay. So let's now segue into your path to mediumship, because now you are a certified, verified medium with the platform verysoul.com. We'll
Yes.
talk about Very Soul. I've done an interview with their founder, Sally Hawk, in the past, but they have a wonderful process for validating their mediums. And so you are a professional medium now. Tell us how you turned that on, discovered it, and turned it to actually not just sensing the energy in a room, but sensing people's loved ones who have passed and helping people by showing them they're here, which is what mediumship is.
Well, what I was doing, there was a period of time when I had a mentor who's taught me to do something that I had to stop doing, and I don't want to go into that because it was just it's too involved.
Mhm.
But what I realized when I was doing that was that a lot of people's passings were difficult. And so I started singing in what's called a threshold choir. And it's a group of people. This is an international movement. This is a group of people who actually sing these comforting songs and go out in twos and threes and fours and sit at the bedside of somebody who's dying or somebody who's ill and sing these songs of comfort.
Oh, goosebumps with that. What a gift.
It was, I've had some incredible experiences doing that. And so, as I was doing that and singing, after we went through the pandemic, there's a wonderful choir that I was singing here with who all through the pandemic, even when we weren't supposed to get together, we were sitting around a fire outside singing
Good.
because we wouldn't stop. We felt the world needed it, and
Huh.
and so we continued to do that. Um, and after we started singing again at bedside, I was experiencing the loved ones of the people who were passing there in the room.
I'm not surprised. Wow,
And
especially you're already open and wow. What was
yeah,
that like? Could you see them, or you just knew they were there? Could you tell this is a mother, this is a
The
relationship?
one the one that really made an effect on me, I went in with one song sister to this woman who was passing, and she was in a care facility. And as I walked in, I could just see her mother was holding her from behind. And
Wow.
she was holding her as if the woman who was dying was actually giving birth. And it was a very interesting posture that she was in. And I was like, and so my song sister and I sat there and we sang. And it was really interesting because as we sang throughout the time, we were there for maybe, I don't know, a half hour, 45 minutes or something like that. And as we sang, I started noticing how the mother was sort of absorbing into the daughter's body. It was fascinating to me. And so it was like they were merging. And she kept, and the woman who was dying was kind of going more and more and more within. She was just kind of going into herself very deeply. And so when we left, my song sister says to me, "Boy, she was really being held." And I said, "Yeah, that was her mother." Um,
Literally, yeah. Wow.
and then we talked about it, and we talked about how we both perceived how she settled into herself as she was dying. And then I was called to go internally, I was called to go back to her bedside a couple of days later. And I went back to her bedside and happened to meet her cousin, who called her sister at first and validated a lot of what I had experienced by
Mm.
saying that her mother had abandoned her when she was a child. And so it was one of those deeply moving experience. Well, that one was the one that really I said, okay, I've got to do something with this. And
Mm.
I was going to a group, I was going to a weekly meeting of different mediums, different people who, not just mediums, but people who were doing different spiritual stuff. And I said, "Do you know of somebody who teaches mediumship?" And they said, "Suzanne Giesemann."
Oh,
So they
okay.
recommended you, and that's when I reached out, and I didn't have money at the time to pay for the class, and you gave it to me as a scholarship.
Well, Spirit said, say yes. It's just one of those things. And Spirit knew you were meant to do this work.
Yeah.
So, this is what I tell everybody, that we can all learn how to connect. You were already open. So, what did you gain from formal training?
What I gained from formal training, Suzanne, it was really important for me to have the protocol, the system that you gave. And just that in your first class, just that shift using the roses.
Oh, yeah, that was making the connection level one.
It may,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I got started. That just that shift using the roses was what I needed to get how to turn it on and turn it off.
Uh-huh. And
And
this is what we do. That's why I tell people I walk around completely normal human mode. I don't see any spirits. I went to Japan for 2 weeks, didn't see an entire spirit, but came back and had to do a reading 3 days later. You just flip the switch and turn it on, and here they are. Of course.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Huh.
of course, I was taking other classes too, but and a lovely medium very generously gave me a 9-month course that I could only pay for the first one, and then she gifted it to me. But she coached and really helped me and really bumped my mediumship up another notch.
Wow.
So
So, how about very soul in a nutshell, and how you were validated, verified by them?
very soul in a nutshell is the quintessential playground for mediums. I, it's a four-tiered process where everyone starts out as a beginner, no matter what their experience level is. And by virtue of having practice sessions with each other and giving each other feedback, we work up through a beautifully designed by spirit, handed down to Sally Hawk, who very wonderfully created this for us, where we go through four different levels of experience, giving readings to each other, giving readings to people who are supportive, as starter clients are called, and then starting to work with the public, the general public, in what are called donated sessions, where anyone in the world can get a free reading from Very Soul for 30 minutes.
And I need to put that out there because Very Soul has so many mediums and not enough sitters. So
Yeah.
here are these mediums who have already passed several levels needing practice with you. And they're going to donate the first one. And then after that, it's very reasonable, but you could just have,
A free reading.
reading with mediums
And
who have passed some levels already. And
yeah,
then
so
you
we
continue
have to
to
prove
build.
ourselves, and proving ourselves means not only is very much about the evidence, it's very much about making a meaningful connection. It's also very much about how we are with people and the ethics.
Right.
The ethics on that platform are what is, to me, what's the most solid there. And then to become a professional medium, that is working with the donated sessions and getting feedback from the people we serve to make sure that we're meeting the standard that is expected. And then verified really has to do with having consistency and that sort of
That's what the question I get often from some of my students is, how do you know when you're ready to go to professional? And I say, you are consistently getting this high level. I'm not happy unless I get 90% accuracy in a reading consistently. Not every reading is going to be perfect, but that your clients leave and say, that was my loved one. So you get feedback after all of these if you're on the platform. And aren't you required to continue to donate regularly a reading? So it's not all about money.
Yes, we're required to, but I love those donated sessions. That's where I'm meeting the people that I have my heart with. These are people who don't have money, who've lost children, had murder. I've had murdered children come to me with the grieving parents. I mean, it is my heart is with those donated sessions. And I want to say too, Suzanne, just to make sure that people understand, not every medium can connect every single time.
That's absolutely right.
And I have to give myself a break sometimes when that person shows up and they're all ready for a reading, and I give them my introduction, and then I get these spirits that they don't recognize, and it's like, okay, so that's for me, that's refund. That's
right. That's the ethics right there. And I just did a reading yesterday that was rescheduled because the first time I sat with this woman, I could not sense anyone. And I knew it was me that day. I just knew there was something going on. And I said, let's reschedule. And we did it yesterday. And I'm always so grateful that we do reschedule and then have a good connection. That's the nature of connecting an energy that's dynamic. So you told me when we were talking earlier that you have a special event coming up.
We do. We have a special event. I'm going to be 4 of us who are very soul verified professional mediums are going to be doing an event as a fundraiser for Very Soul on August 2nd. And I want to talk about how to sign up for it. It's a very simple link. It's go.verysoul.com/special. And that will get anybody who's not in the platform, that will get them to the August 2nd event. The space is limited. So, we want to, if you want that,
I'll fill up now.
It's going to fill up. Or current clients can log into verysoul.com and go to their special event. There's a special events link, and you can book the August 2nd event.
And what is it?
4 of us, Very Soul verified mediums are going to be doing a mediumship demonstration. We're going to do evidential mediumship, demonstrating the continuation of life. And it's wonderful because these are mediums that I work with and play with and study with, and we're all very different. So it gives everyone an opportunity to see not only the quality of mediumship that's there, but how very different every medium really is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trained by Janet No Havoc, and she has passed, but I know she will allow me right now to say there was the one way to do it. And that's the way I was taught. Then I went and studied with the spiritualists. And at the time in 2009, there was the one way to do it. And it's taken me a while to get outside of the box and realize there are different ways to do mediumship, but I still insist on let's get some evidence every time and let's get the messages from the loved one. Now, if you have a different style, okay. But then rule number 1, always do no harm, right?
Exactly. And I also want to say that the Very Soul platform, anyone who wants a professional medium, there are so many of us who are professional mediums. I don't know how many total, but you can go through this whole set of people and look at our bios and see who you're drawn to, because that's also part of it. And you'll know that if you're looking at a professional medium there, that we have gone through some extensive trial and error before we got there. And
this is not somebody that took a weekend class and says I'm a medium and just hangs their shingle out. That scares me that happens. That's not what you're going to find on verysoul.com. Yeah. And you have a website now. What is it?
I have it. It's ellenmccord.com. It's just my name. And I have on there I have to say, the thing that I'm most interested in, Suzanne, as much as I love mediumship, I'm very interested in people developing their intuitive and creative abilities to become more discerning and more confident in their own abilities. So when I was taking this class with that lovely medium who gifted me so many classes, I was drawing a set of oracle cards. And I have a friend who nicknamed me Planet Ellen because I do have this unique set of perceptions and ways of being in the world. And so they're called Planet Ellen's homespun oracle cards. I haven't gotten it published yet, but I have a set of experiences on my website that have to do with exploring creativity and exploring the creative and intuitive side of our existence. And I have a passion about that. I have some concerns about people relying on AI so much and not realizing that that's just an overlay on human consciousness is way
That's right.
bigger than that.
That's right, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, so
So are
that's
you a full-time medium now? Are you able to uh,
I
dedicate
don't
most of your time to that?
no, I don't do that full time, and the reason I don't is because to me the work is sacred and it needs to be in context with a balanced life. And I'm in my 70s and I have a little dog and I live on an island and I go to the beach, which I did before we did this. And
Nice.
I take very few actually professional sessions. I only take about 4 of them a week. And
That's me too. That's that balancing with the family time and the me time. It's so important, especially you who have always been a highly sensitive person and knows how much energy this vessel can handle.
that's right. And then I take usually two donated sessions a week as well. So I do 6 sessions a week and that's it.
Nice. Very nice. So of all the subjects that we covered here, what didn't we cover? And is there anything you want to amplify?
You know, Suzanne, the one thing I want to amplify is that every single person walking on the planet has the ability to develop their intuitive connection with the divine. And I know that that's the drum you beat constantly. But I think that, we can go to mediums or do whatever, but that development of that discernment, that intuitive connection, and I do believe that what I said in 1974 is true, that humanity is going through that evolution. And when someone is in a liminal state, which is what happens when we go through this kind of threshold, when I step through the threshold and on to the other side, that liminal state is a very susceptible state. And so I think it's so important for people to develop their intuition and discernment for themselves and be able to sort of sort through all of
What
this.
do you mean by susceptible state?
Liminality, if you look it up, I don't know if it's still this defined this way in Wikipedia, but it is the state that people enter when in ancient times when they were going through rites of passage. And a rite of passage, and I've gone through that, I've experienced this because I was a part of a large community of people who were indigenous and all the kids went through their coming of age ceremonies.
Mm.
Um, there's a there's a point at which walking through that threshold, that liminal threshold, there's an ego death. There's a point at which the story, as you would call it, drops away. And that's when in traditional societies, traditional places, the high priestesses or the elders would surround someone and help them and guide them about their next stage of life. So in the ceremonies I was in, it was all the women in the circle would sit around and the young woman who was coming of age, we'd spend the whole night with her and we would fill her with the wisdom, but she would build up to it, spend a year preparing, making tobacco ties, all those things. That liminal state is a very susceptible state. It's a state where, in my case, I was in a liminal state and I was put into a place where I was I experienced something awful enough that I didn't ever want to experience that state of mind again.
What I'm hearing is a vulnerable state. Is that what you're saying?
It's vulnerable, but it's also susceptible to manipulation.
Ah,
So, for example, when I came out of those hospitalized, where I was literally locked up and had my rights of walking around in the world taken away,
mhm,
I walked out thinking I had a broken brain
mm,
because the the elders in that circle,
yeah,
the knowledgeable ones, were telling me that that's what I had. Well, they were wrong. My
yeah.
brain wasn't broken.
So this leads me to a really great way to bring this to fullness here. If you were to encounter someone now, just out of the blue, not in a circle, not in a ceremony, just you were at maybe in a class or something, and somebody came up to you and you recognized they might have crossed through that threshold and they're not balanced. What, how would you deal with that? How would you help them?
I would not try to help someone I didn't know.
Hmm.
I think it's very important that someone, because I've been a part of peer movements, and I've had friends going through, and I've gone through these states with surrounding with friends. And what they need during that time, what people need when they're going through that, is they need to be surrounded with love and support and gentle boundaries so that they don't, because it's like being in a dream state, and you
Hmm.
know, we might see or do things that just make no sense to anybody else. So love, support, gentle boundaries, and then what really needs to happen from my point of view is that I believe the mental health system needs to get a better handle on how to support people in those. There are respite centers now that are peer run that are helpful. There's things like Open Dialogue in Great Britain that is very helpful there, but I think that the mental health system is suffering from a failure of imagination
Hmm.
in terms of having so many people who want to help and are very loving, good people who worked really hard to get there, but they are superimposing a system that is not um, conducive to empowering the people they're serving.
So what if you're in a direct conversation? I'm asking this because I've had this happen to me. And you can
I
tell this
bet.
person is what we would call delusional. Okay.
Mhm.
What would you say?
I would say whatever it is that I'm hearing that sounds delusional to me, I would go with them and ask them about it. What do it's like, talk about it. I think people are afraid because for two reasons. There's something going on there with that person that's, you know,
That's their reality.
it's their reality, and what is underneath it is something that they need to be the ones in charge of. No one else can be in charge of that. No one else can take over for that. Um, but they need to also not be getting, because they're in a hypersensitive state and everything is really sensitive, they need to be not receiving telepathically the message that there's something wrong with them.
Oh, yeah.
And that I think is the biggest problem for people who have had the experience I'm having is that I've had, and I will have it again, I'm sure, encountering people who think that I'm crazy, and I feel their judgment and their projections of who I am and what I'm about
Yeah.
when I'm in that state.
Yeah.
So it's more about being open. The second piece of this is I have come to believe out of all of the experience I've had with peers going through these things, is that there's also an energetic piece that opens kind of a portal that is a little bit frightening for people who aren't familiar with it. And so there's a way in which people who aren't familiar with it go, "Whoa, I don't, I don't
Oh,
want it.
yes. I've
I
seen
don't
that a
want,
lot.
I
Yeah.
don't want that." And so they block and try to fear, and that's where all the control and the lockup and all of that kind of happens.
Mm.
Now I'm generalizing, and I've got to be very careful because there are people who go through things that are very different from what I've gone through, and I cannot speak to those things at all.
You've done a beautiful job of making that clear, and you're not trying to heal anybody or cure anyone, and speaking only from your personal experience, which is beautiful. But you've definitely given us food for thought and an awareness of how energy can distort this human perception.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow. And I pray that anybody who's going through a period where they are frightened and don't know how to deal with it will be led to people who can treat them lovingly and help.
I want to mention one more resource that I think is really important, Suzanne, and that is the Integrative Mental Health University. There are people who are part of that network who have gone through training on spiritual emergency. And so they're all they're around I think there are different places in the world, but I know there's some in the United States and Canada and England. But they have studied with Emma Bragdon, who I just have an enormous amount of respect for, who is associated with the Spiritist hospitals and is
Wow.
actually she is taking a group of people. I just got her newsletter, I think yesterday. She's taking a group of people to Brazil. Has another trip scheduled, but she trains people who are in the professions that are associated with assisting people in distress in spiritual emergence and in helping people in spiritual emergence. And there's a whole list and a whole um, directory of those
So
people
that's
on the
Integrative Mental Health Foundation or
university.
University.
It's
Okay.
actually a learning, it's actually educational and, you know, like that.
Awesome. All right. Well, final parting words for anybody. What wisdom would you like to share? More wisdom than you already have as we
Love
wrap
yourself,
this up.
no matter what it is, and don't judge yourself. I think
Well,
the love for ourselves and being able to be vulnerable and connecting with other people and being human is just such a huge gift to everyone.
you've been a gift to us to see someone who went through some very frightening experiences, but on your own and with help from other loving people, radiate peace right now. You have this lovely calm energy, and you've used what used to frighten you, you've turned it now into the gift of mediumship and are helping others with that. So it's a beautiful thing. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
It's been an honor to be here with you. I really appreciate the time.
It's an honor for all of us. Huh? Isn't that right, everybody? So that's Ellen McCord. Check out her website, check out some of the resources she talked about, attend her special event with berrysoul.com and check that out as well. All right. I hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back live with you next week, but this recording will stay out there. Share it with your friends. Subscribe to the channel to help this reach more people, please. We're very grateful for all of you being on this Awaken Way path with us. Go out and have a great week, okay?